Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on earth. And I say that at the beginning of every single video. And recently, I've had a bunch of people sending me hate mail because, like, for instance, in today's video, we're going to talk about a game that we played about a TV show called Knight Rider. But all the time, I get people sending me hate mail that they're so angry it's not an actual episode of whatever that week's topic is. I I genuinely don't know how to be more clear than I am already being. The name of my channel is a description of what we are, right? Um, so if you're interested in hearing about a role-playing game that we played about Knight Rider, that's what this episode's about. If you're looking for an actual episode of Knight Rider, sorry, that's not what this is. So okay, before we get into the game itself, make sure you smash the like button. Check to see if you're still subscribed because YouTube loves to unsubscribe people and not tell them. Ring the bell for notifications so you know when I upload more stuff, and leave us a comment. It helps me out on my end with the algorithm, but even more so, I like hearing from you guys. We've got an awesome community, and it's all thanks to you. So thank you for being here. So, okay, all that said, let's dive into the actual role-playing game itself. So the prologue to this one takes place in 1982 when a Las Vegas police officer named Michael Long is shot and left for dead in the desert by a woman named Tanya Walker. He wakes up quite a while later in a hospital bed and finds that he is the guest of Wilton Knight, the owner of Knight Industries and the founder of FLAG, which stands for the Foundation for Law and Government. Michael Long has been declared legally dead at this point, and he's also been given plastic surgery that gave him a new face. The Foundation for Law and Government has also created a alternate identity for him, which is Michael Knight. And most importantly of all, they give him KITT, which stands for the Knight Industries 2000. KITT is bulletproof. He has artificial intelligence. He has autopilot. He's got ejector seats, an electronic jamming system, a flamethrower, a grappling hook, scanners, and of course, turbo boost, which gives KITT what DC Heroes refers to as the jumping power. So together, KITT and Michael Knight track down Tanya Walker and bring her to justice. Michael agrees to work for the Foundation for Law and Government, and he tells KITT that this looks like the start of a beautiful friendship. So that's our prologue to the game. Then we get into the main plot, which takes place in November of 1982, when KITT has a run-in with his evil twin, KARR. And KARR, by the way, stands for the Knight Automated Roving Robot. And as it turns out, KITT was actually the second time that Knight Industries tried to reverse engineer the Cylon technology that they gained access to in 1980. But their first attempt was KARR, who at this point is physically identical to KITT, but unlike KITT, whose primary program is to protect the life of Michael Knight, KARR's primary program is to protect the life of KARR. So the two supercars come to blows, and we roll initiative to see who is faster. And KITT rolled higher, so he goes first. And in DC Heroes, he needs to roll an 11 or better in order to hit somebody with the same stats that he has, right? They have the same dexterity. But when KITT drives up next to KARR on the highway and he slams into him, they both have something called a molecular bonded shell, which simply put means that both of them have way higher defenses than they do offensive abilities. So despite the fact that he hits, KITT doesn't do any damage at all. So then it's KARR's turn. he slams into KITT, and just like before, making contact isn't hard, but doing damage is. So at the end of round 1, both KITT and KARR have full hit points. On round 2, KITT maneuvers around so that he's in front of KARR, and KITT has a rear-facing flamethrower. So he uses that, and he rolls the dice, and he gets what he needs, but not enough to actually hurt KARR. By the way, in DC Heroes, for anyone new tuning in, if you roll something called doubles, for instance, if you roll the dice, you roll 2 10-sided dice, and if you get, say, double 5s, that means that you get to roll the dice again, and you keep the first sum that you had, but now you roll up a second sum, and then you add the 2 sums together, right? And if you keep rolling doubles, then you actually then, like in this case, KITT would have the ability to do physical damage to KARR if he rolls high enough. Does that make sense? And if anything I say does not make sense, just say something in the comments section and I'll clear it up. At any rate, so now it's KARR's turn. So KARR uses Turbo Boost, which is the jumping power, right? And he jumps over KITT. He gets in front of him on the highway, and he runs a car off the road. So the car is, of course, full of innocent bystanders who end up in a ditch. And so then on Michael Knight's turn, he breaks off the attack to go check on these people who are in the ditch to make sure that they're okay. So while Michael uses the first aid skill because he's trained as a first responder, right? KARR drives away. And by the time the ambulance shows up, KARR is long gone. So Michael Knight returns to the Foundation for Law and Government, where he has a meeting with his boss, who is an older British gentleman by the name of Devin Miles. And Michael has to tell him that KARR got away. And initially, Devin is upset because, of course, KARR's doing stuff like running people off the road. You know, you get it, right? But so Michael explains, you know, why he broke off the attack and so on and so forth. And Devin completely understands. And he tells Michael he made the right decision. So then in comes Bonnie Barstow. And she is a female brunette scientist who works for the Foundation. And she says that, you know, KITT had very, very minor damage where some of his stuff basically just got rattled from the impacts. So she fixed anything that needed fixed. But she also says that if they want, she can build a laser. And that maybe the laser could do some damage to KARR. And it's like, since they built KARR, they think they know how to take him out. And like I said before, in our game, KARR is based on Cylon technology, which was kind of a sequel to an old TV show called Galactica 1980, which was also made by the same guy who made Knight Rider. So at any rate, so her idea then is, you know, we'll use a Cylon laser then, you know, and that should work. That should do some damage. So she does. And a little bit of time goes by in game, you know, Michael and KITT are driving around. KITT is really weirded out by this whole thing. KITT, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, has a very human-like personality, and he has feelings, and it's not too awful hard, actually, to hurt his feelings. So he sort of, up until now, he's felt like one of a kind. You know what I mean? He's proud of the fact he's an individual. And now he suddenly feels kind of mass-produced. He feels a little more like a thing than a person, stuff like that. So Michael's kind of giving him pep talks and cheering him up and, you know, that kind of thing. So they go on patrol. They don't find anything. They go back to the Foundation. And Bonnie's got the laser done. And so she basically said, it's a good news, bad news kind of situation. The good news is that it can probably take out KARR's electrical system in 2 hits. So then Michael asks, what's the bad news? And Bonnie explains that 2 laser blasts, because the power drain is so massive that you only get 2 shots, and it's going to drain KITT's battery. And again, you need to roll an 11 or better on 2 10-sided dice in order to hit someone who's your equal, right? So each shot, he only has a 50-50 chance of making it. So this is a pretty risky kind of thing they're talking about. And so Michael basically says, let's say I miss a shot, then what do I do to finish off KARR? And Devin says, whatever you come up with, you better come up with it quick before KARR hurts anyone else. Meanwhile, KARR is hanging out with a couple of petty thieves named Tony and the Rev. They drive KARR through the wall of a bank directly into the vault, where they then steal as much as they can, then get away. And all the while, by the way, the bank guards are shooting at them. But the way they do it, they plan it ahead of time where they drive in such a way that the KARR's passenger door is facing the door into the vault. So it's blocking their ability to really get in there, first of all, right? And then that means that when they're shooting at Tony and Rev, KARR is in the way. And again, he's bulletproof and practically indestructible, right? So that's how they're accomplishing this. And they just kind of crouch down low, grab bags of money, throw them in the back seat, crawl back into KARR, and then KARR takes off. And for that matter, when the police show up, right, KARR is like the ideal getaway car. You can't shoot out the tires, you can't shoot out the windows, and KARR has a ridiculous top speed. So he just leaves the authorities in the dust every time, right? So Michael Knight does a little bit of detective work, which is kind of where he shines. And he takes a look at the pattern of the robberies, and he correctly figures out where he needs to go to be on patrol. So the next time these guys rob a bank, KITT is waiting for him and tries to get a surprise attack bonus against KARR when Michael fires the laser. So again, Michael needs to roll an 11 or better to hit. And so he rolls 2d10 and he gets a 10 and an 8. So that hits, and it takes out half of KARR's hit points. Michael Knight then cashes in his 2 remaining automatic actions for 1 more dice action. And he fires the laser again. This time on 2d10, he rolls a 7 and a 10. So he hits again. He got really lucky. The odds were not that he was going to hit both times, right? But he does. And just as Bonnie intended, the laser knocks out KARR's systems. So in game mechanics, KARR is knocked out. His temporary hit points have reached 0. So he just quits working. And since he can't drive away now, the police surround the bad guys and arrest them. And that brings us to the epilogue. So KITT tows KARR back to Knight Industries, where Bonnie is upset that Michael is using KITT like a tow truck again. Ironically, that does more damage to KITT than most things do. And at Knight Industries, then KARR is dismantled and taken down into all of his the smallest pieces they can break them down into, basically. And then all of those pieces are placed in a series of vaults in cold storage. Unfortunately, Wilton Knight, who was the founder of Knight Industries, who I don't know if I mentioned, he dies. That was like his last act, was basically creating KITT and helping, establish Michael, the new identity and all that stuff. So Wilton's gone now. And he leaves behind a widow named Elizabeth Knight, right? And Wilton Knight was almost kind of like a James Bond kind of guy back in his day, right? And unfortunately, one of his weaknesses is he's a sucker for a pretty face, even to the point of getting with a woman who has a villainous motivation, right? And that was the case with Elizabeth. And she has other plans for KARR, and she has access to those vaults. So we haven't seen the last of him. Ultimately, KITT's evil twin is going to team up with Michael Knight's evil twin, who is named Garth Knight. And he is actually the son of Wilton and Elizabeth. But that's a story for another day. And that was it, actually, for this game session. This one was shorter than I had hoped because got higher dice rolls than were probable to have, right? We haven't actually ran very many Knight Rider adventures, but I do think, though, that DC Heroes is the perfect system to use. And we have ran some, but it's kind of rare for us to run Michael and KITT as player characters. Normally, it's more like Michael and KITT are NPCs who kind of pop up for a cameo in somebody else's adventure. And in my opinion, KITT can be a little hard to run because he is, at least in season 1, pretty much invulnerable to harm, right? And so that's a challenge to deal with as a GM. And then the other thing that can be a challenge is that in a Knight Rider role-playing game, pretty much everything that Michael does has to take place behind the steering wheel, right? So it limits where he can go. Like, for instance, I can't really run an adventure on the second story of a building that can't support the weight of KITT without collapsing. You know what I mean? And when Michael Knight gets out of KITT, whoever is playing KITT is bored until Michael gets back. And then also, Michael Knight just doesn't have very many hit points in DC Heroes. So he is like super death prone in terms of his stats, because in a role-playing game, and I know I've said this in other videos, but there's no plot armor, right? So we try to keep Michael in the driver's seat as much as possible. Interestingly enough, I've actually ran more games with KARR than KITT, because for me, it's way easier to run KARR as a villain that more traditional characters have to deal with. For the most part, I try to go easy on him because in my mind, KARR kind of just wants his freedom. And he's not really trying to take over the world or anything like that. He just sort of drives around, in my games anyways. And if the heroes try to fight him, he tends to be immune to damage, and he has a high top speed, so he's good at getting away. And then they have to deal with that, so that then becomes the challenge. Because like I said, with a traditional Knight Rider adventure, coming up with challenges is kind of hard when KITT is the protagonist. And my favorite adventure with KARR in it actually was one where a friend of mine named Chris Crows, he was playing in it, and he was playing like a race called the Delphi, and they're this alien race, and they're like huge. They're like really, really tall, and they're really, really strong. And the way he beat KARR was he managed to flip them upside down. And so then KARR was kind of like a turtle, like when a turtle's on its back and it can't right itself. That was kind of the deal with KARR. And I remember that spawned this big conversation about turbo boost and like how exactly does, like, what's happening with turbo boost? you know? Um, I felt like the show didn't exactly spell it out. I assumed it was like compressed air and that you're shooting air out. That it doesn't seem to be jets. It's not like rocket thrusters or something. We never see fire, right? And there's always that sound that I wondered if that sound was letting that compressed air out of wherever it's stored. And then I also kind of wondered if the reason, because of course the real reason is when they were making the show, they only had the budget to jump a time or two in each episode, right? Because jumping cars in real life tends to total the car, and you know what I mean? The producers aren't going to be thrilled if they're just wrecking cars left and right. So, but you got to wonder kind of like that's the out of game thing, but the in game thing is like, well, why doesn't KITT like just turbo boost all the time, right? And so that got me thinking that, well, maybe, there's this air tank and it's only got so much air in it, you know? Um, and then that kind of made sense to me. So we kind of went that route. And at any rate, so Krosa's gigantic character was at one point seen carrying KARR like under his arm. And KARR was struggling and using turbo boost, and like we showed the wheels were flipping around like as if KARR was steering left to right, struggling and doing what he could. He was trying to open his doors to see if that helped any, and nothing helped. But that was really funny. I just remember like visually I could really imagine someone like a huge like giganta basically, right? Just carrying KARR and walking away, and KARR's kind of helpless because he's not on the ground, you know what I mean? And your invulnerability is not really helping you in this situation. So I always thought that was really cool. And Krosa's character's company ended up reverse engineering KARR and like kind of took him apart and was seeing, what made it tick. And so they made copies of him with completely different programming. Because like I said earlier in the video, KARR's programming is the problem, right? It's that self-preservation thing. If you get rid of that, KARR seems fine. Um, and something I always thought was interesting was the color of KARR's lights, right? That KITT, of course, most people are familiar with KITT. If you think about what he looks like, obviously he's a black Trans Am, but I feel like the big thing that stands out is he's got that red scanner, right? The red light bar on the front that kind of swooshes left to right, Um, and then also he had red lights on his dashboard as well that I always kind of thought of like it represented a mouth in a way, like when he's talking. But so in KARR's first appearance, if I remember correctly, his lights were also red because when they filmed the show for the KARR things, they had like a bunch of Trans Ams, right? And so they would just grab one of the extra Trans Ams for the KARR stuff initially. And then in KARR's second appearance, I think little kids watching the show were getting confused and they didn't know who was doing what. So they painted like a silver stripe that ran along the bottom of KARR, and that helped kids kind of tell them apart. And then the other thing was they changed the color of those lights. And so depending on the old TV sets that you're watching it on in the 80s, right? KARR's lights were a different color for the different TVs. Just happened to be that way because like for instance my TV had a knob where you could turn it and you could change the tint or the color of the picture on the screen, right? So depending on how you had your TV set, my understanding is that the actual light they were filming was yellow, but then if people had their tint turned over with a little too much red, then that would make the scanner look orange. If they had a little too much blue, that made the scanner look green. You know what I mean? And so, like, if you do a Google image search, you will find pictures of KARR with orange, yellow, and green scanners. That's what's going on with that, right? So at any rate, when we built copies of KARR in our game, we went with blue lights since red, orange, yellow, and green were basically already taken. Oh, and another game that we once ran was that since Tops on the Knight Rider TV show, you constantly see where they will contact the Foundation for Law and Government asking for some kind of help. And like, maybe it's like a small town in the South and there's like a biker gang has shown up because it's usually there's some kind of a vehicular problem going on, right? Since obviously it's a car show. So we decided that if any police department anywhere seems to know what the Foundation for Law and Government is, it's easy to contact them. It's easy to get KITT and Michael to come out and deal with things. We ran a game where the authorities in question who contacted Flag were Boss Hogg and Roscoe P. Coltrane from the Dukes of Hazzard. And so then Michael gets sent out, and of course the information Devin gives him in that adventure is basically, yeah, we heard from the local sheriff and his deputies, and they say these Duke boys are criminals and they're kind of hoodlums, and like the police department, like they've lost all these cruisers and pawns and blah blah blah. You look at the Dukes of Hazzard thing from the flip side of the coin, and if you assume that the cops are the good guys in that situation, right, then it gave us an excuse to do, Dukes of Hazzard versus Knight Rider, and that was fun. And of course, by the end of that adventure, Michael Knight ends up teaming up with the Duke boys. He figures out what's what, you know what I mean? And of course, he gets the girl, which is Daisy Duke. And in my opinion, that was the crossover that I really wanted to see as a little kid. That the two shows, they both had cool cars, the cars both jumped, so on and so forth. I was like, when are we going to see these guys meet? And it was different networks, so obviously it never happened. But so that was the cool thing about a role-playing game. You can do stuff like that. So we really enjoyed that one. Speaking of which, hopefully you enjoyed hearing me talk about the various appearances of KITT and KARR in our games. If so, as always, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell, and leave us a comment. From everybody here at the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.